Hey guys, it's Becky from the Resource Podcast. We are live on air at IMARC. We're actually in one of the diggers where we are been lucky enough to come in. I can imagine it's probably one of the first time that Heels have been in the cab. But we've been going around and asking people about their company, about the people behind the company and the culture and what keeps people involved in their company. The guys who actually have this one, the guy that we spoke to said that he's been with the company for 17 years and there's people who've been involved for 50 years. So we've been having some great conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it. And if you like and subscribe below so that you can follow along with the Resource Podcast. I'm just here with Jana from Reflectal, and I wanted to ask her a question around maybe her experiences within the workplace and how we can improve our experiences in the workplace. So how would you feel about that question and what kind of comes to mind when I ask you that?
So I'm probably in the special category of people who'll proudly put my hand up and say that I have a lived experience of workplace mental harm, and to the point where I had panic attacks from a work-related psychosocial injury, so work-related harm. Yeah. And really Reflectal is around recognising that resilience is great, working on yourself is great, being as strong as you can, exercising, eating well, having a sense of community. You can do all of those things. But if something happens that's completely outside of your control, that is part of a hazard in the workplace, you can be injured. You might just be a little bit better at bouncing back, but it doesn't mean you don't fall the whole way.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, I love that. Great answer. Do you mind me, we didn't talk about this before, but do you mind me adding on to that? The laws and legislation's changed around psychosocial hazards. Where do you think we've seen a vast improvement in it in a good way? And then what ways have we got to go?
I think the biggest improvement we've seen is probably not in any outcomes. I don't think we're there yet, but I think we're there in awareness. So we've gone from a point where people said, you know, it's about individuals, it's about wellness programs, it's about having an EAP, whereas you're getting a bit more maturity in the conversation at the moment where people are starting to recognise that some of these hazards are real and they are absolutely the responsibility and accountability of organisations to understand those hazards, have a risk profile and then be managing those hazards the same way they would for a physical safety risk. And that's, I think, the maturity piece that we're starting to see. I don't think we've seen the outcomes yet.
Okay, awesome. We've got another guest coming onto the podcast and we're going to be talking about the future generations in mining. The whole conversation that we're speaking about right now and your experience, and I'm sorry to hear that you had that experience, is, it's important for us to talk about the future generations. What are some of the things, maybe one, because I know there's a plethora, like you said, of things that we need to get done ASAP before we can welcome those new generation in?
I think the biggest thing, and this comes down to inclusion, it comes down to diversity, but take away all those words, it actually just comes down to, unlike with physical safety, when you do your analysis from a risk point of view, you really need to actually be doing it with a demographic lens over it. And I think that's probably the most important thing that's missing for a lot of organisations and even within the legislation and the guidance, is that the experience of people from a risk point of view of maybe over 50s is going to be different to people who are under 25. It's going to be different to people who are under 20. There's different cultural and social expectations, and there's different things that are going to have escalated risk factors based on demographics. And that's where I think the opportunity sits from understanding how the legislation fits, is going not just, here is my data, here is my risk assessment, it's also going, what does that risk look like based on different profiles within the workforce? And you look at younger people, and in a lot of ways they are actually more vulnerable. So they're more vulnerable because you know that where you have an imbalance in power and control, you've got a heightened risk factor because you're less likely to speak out. And it's not about younger people not having resilience. It's not around like this generation isn't the strong generation. It's just that imbalance that exists, and that's always existed. And you kind of talk to some of those people and they say, back in the day we used to haze people. And you're like, oh, well, that was actually still terrible. But it's the recognition that power imbalance has always existed. But if we can educate people and we can have a better understanding around what that means now, and that it's not okay and it never was, then that's a more mature conversation.
So we can do better always. The solution that you have created, I know you're coming to market at the moment, is do you want to speak us through that and why you find that that's important as a step to start taking in finding that solution?
Yes, absolutely. So Reflectal, our background is mining. This is the industry kind of we grew up in. And it's really around taking the last 20 years of physical safety and understanding what's worked and saying it's not something that comes from, a corporate office. It's not something that comes out, once a year as a risk assessment. It's saying how do you have routines that are normal? So your toolbox talks, your weekly safety meetings, your leadership check-ins, and using those routines in a technology platform that does continuous risk assessment with that demographic data capture, but then also coupled with a learning approach where you are micro or nano learning, so taking the concept off social media, where you have these bite-sized bits of information that are just nudging you to grow over time and learn. So the platform really is around continuous risk assessment, hey, how you going, smiley faces, thumbs up, thumbs down, as accessible as it can be, but then also with your team, who are the people who are the most likely to lift you up at work, but also the highest risk factor from a people point of view, choosing together what you actually want to learn and what you want to talk about and what's important from a hazard point of view that is work related. So it's not around resilience, it's not around kind of what you're doing in your personal life, it's do you actually know the policies and procedures in your workplace? Are they fair policies and procedures? Do you have the right tools to do your job? Those tools might be different if you are a 6'5" person or if you're a 5'4" person. That looks different, but having a guide that takes you through some of those conversations to what practically works in a workplace, but in under 5 minutes, that's where we see there's a huge potential because conversation, learning and routine, that's where you see change happen.
Awesome. I think you speak on that so well. So if anybody would like to reach out or get in touch as well, so Reflectal, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I've got Smitha here from Achilles, and I was asking the question around culture and what that looks like for you and your experiences with it. You said that you work between, Australia and India, and so you've got a lot of different, like globally. How would you speak to that? What's the difference? And what can you see that we do well in Australia that we could do better, and vice versa in India and globally?
Sure. Thanks for that question and nice meeting you, Becky. I would say there's a definitely huge difference in the culture across the world. There's no two regions or countries that will have similar setup. I would say traditionally or culturally, India is more softer, emotional, and like to have like a family environment at work. Like we feel like we always keep saying, we can never take our work out of us because we try to find a family even in the office setup. Something that I've kind of seen slightly different is in most countries is there's a clear demarcation about where work ends and where family begins. So when they're at work, it's pretty professional, and then when they're back home, it's pretty personal. That kind of demarcation is there. I think somewhere down the line with India, it gets a little blurred, and that's the reason people like to kind of have more engagement. There's more fun at work. There's more engagement activities where people will go out for lunches. They will actually eat lunch together every day in the office. We kind of do it like a potluck where people will share their food and like have a long table. So that kind of a thing is very different. We have people coming from all across the world into our office in India, and we've seen that this is very unique to us because they all get surprised saying that you all are all kind of taking a break together, having one big family. You do celebrations together. There are people from different religion, still ensuring that we celebrate all religion and festivals in a way that everybody feel uniformed. There's more diversity, but still there's a lot of unity. So I think that's definitely is very unique, I would say, with an Indian culture perspective. We always try to ensure people feel more welcomed. What we can learn from other cultures is the kind of extreme dedication that they have with regards to going in depth of every subject, like asking a why before doing the job. I think with India, we sometimes just nod our head for everything, like, yeah, we'll do it, without really sometimes asking all the right questions, like why you want me to do it, because we feel asking a why could be offensive. But I've learned this from other cultures. It's absolutely fine to ask a why, because when you do that, you might be able to give it a different story, which maybe the person who's asked you to do the job has not really explained, and you will have your own touch to it. So I think that's something that if I have to say one each, that's what I will say from India perspective, that emotional connect and, working as a family and having a very positive work environment, having a very welcoming work environment. And from other culture perspective, having the courage to actually ask a why and get more engaged and involved in what they want to do.
I love that. And I love that, when you're talking about it, it's that family orientation. I would say that actually we could probably learn a little bit from that in different countries as well, of making it so that the lines might get blurred sometimes, but having somewhere where you enjoy going to work could make a huge
to it. Yeah.
Can make a huge difference for people. So when it comes to the work ethic is what you were talking about, and the questioning why, does it come from a place of a respect or hierarchy, or can you speak a little bit more into that?
Yeah, I think that's kind of, you touched on it. India is still pretty hierarchical in that way, because we believe that when there is a boss, you need to say yes for everything that the boss says. I'm not saying this is a story for 100% of the Indian citizens, but this is the most of the time, this is what works in an Indian culture, that a boss is the final, like he has the final or she has the final words. If they've said something, you have to do it. So I think that's where somewhere down the line, we kind of learn to, over a period of time, we've learned to just say yes for everything, and we kind of worry before challenging our superiors. So that's where I would say the culture is driven. And I think with other regions or countries, I feel it's very equal. People don't really think about the hierarchy when they're talking to them, or think about, you know more than me and I know less than you. So that kind of thoughts are not running. So they speak their mind. And that's why I think they feel more comfortable in really kind of being themselves. I might say yes to you just because I don't want to offend you. But back of my mind, I'm thinking like, how I'm going to actually make this happen, because I'm not really convinced this is the right thing. So I might just struggle then. There would be that stress, that anxiety that will come with that, which I've not seen in most countries where people are open to speak their mind. So that's kind of how I would differentiate that.
I love that. Thank you so much for answering that so specifically, but also in a broader sense of how we can make differences and things. Do you speak? Are you a speaker?
No, I'm not.
I think you should. I think you are quite good at it.
I do at some places, but not today.
Yeah, you're so eloquent. So thank you. I'm glad that we came up to you and we had a chat. And so Achilles, what is it that Achilles does?
Yeah, we are a supply chain sustainable solution. So it's a SaaS platform, service as a software as a service, sorry. We are predominantly an answer to a lot of questions that businesses have about how do they assess their scope 1, 2, and 3, carbon emissions, and how do they manage the massive supply chain, ensuring that they're ticking the environmental, social, and the governance box. So as a business, we ensure that we do a due diligence of the entire supply chain, collect the data, assess the data to ensure that it's a validated information going back to the business, and we help them with a lot of analytics at the back of it. We also put foot on the ground, or boots on the ground, where we send our auditors into the sites, and we ensure that they actually go ahead and inspect the site, do some labor interviews to understand, is it really what your documents are saying it is? Like, do you really get your PPE kits? Do you actually experience any form of modern slavery activities in the space that, like, especially mining can be a touchy topic, because in mining we hear a lot of, modern slavery practices where, children are involved in that, or maybe there are kind of extended hours of work and not right, living condition for the labor. So we kind of touch on those topics, and we give reports back to the businesses so they can then fix the problem.
Do you mind speaking into that a little bit more around the? Do you mind? I'll ask you. That's very definitely putting it around modern slavery and stuff. Are you happy to touch on?
I'm happy to give you some examples. Do you want me to give you some examples?
Yeah, so we'll cut that little bit. I didn't want to chuck you into that, because obviously that's a hard conversation. So what I'll ask you is, like, what are the findings? I can give you some
examples without calling out the customer names.
Perfect. So touching on what we were speaking about around modern slavery, it's obviously a big subject to talk about. What are the findings that you have come across, and what are the things that kind of prick your ears around changes that need to be made in that?
It's actually pretty interesting findings and scary at the same time, I would say, because we're talking about human here, right? And the kind of findings that we come across, and I'm actually getting goosebumps even when I'm saying that. But there are things like, when we have sent our auditors on the field, we have come across laborers with like a small bunk room with bunk beds and just one cabinet. And literally they have no place to sit. So if they want to actually sit down, they have to sit on the bunk bed with the back like this. That's the kind of conditions that they have. They are people where their passports are taken over because they've come from India, Bangladesh, and maybe different developing countries where they've come with the aim of earning a little more, and that's why they've kind of taken up these jobs where they've signed a bond which says they won't quit for the next 2 years or something. We call that as a bonded labor in the true sense, but because what happened here is they will then take the passports away, and they don't get the passports if they're not comfortable in that working environment. So this is another example of modern slavery. We have actually spoken to people who have had tears in their eyes saying that I want to go back, but I can't because my passport is with them, and they're not going to give me until I finish my 2 years of contract. We've also come across cases wherein laborers have worked for almost 49 days without a single day off. 49 days, it's in our stats, it's in our reports, without a single day off. Inhuman in a way, but that's the kind of examples that we come across. There are many other cases and examples that I can keep going on and on about, but it's true reality where, US has actually implemented Uyghur Forced Labor Act, which says that you should not be sourcing anything from a place called Xinjiang area in China. The reason being there are a lot of forced Muslim laborers who work there. What's happened is when we went for an audit in one such factory in China, for the customer that we were auditing, they had everything working perfectly fine. It looked so perfect that you would just give them a clean report. But our auditor was obviously smart enough to gauge that something was not right, and he could sense that there was a particular partition in that factory which felt like a false wall. He knocked. And then he figured it out that there's a back door, and that's where all these forced labor activities is happening. And when we're like, what's this? And he's like, yeah, but this is not for your customer. For your customer, we're doing a clean work. It's like, no, that's not what we're trying to say here. We're saying that irrespective of who you're working for, there should not be these wrong practices. So that's another example of a modern slavery, right? Where you're kind of trying to give a clean shit for some customers, but as a culture, as a business, you still encourage this kind of wrong practices. So I would say having the boots on the ground gives you the real reality check, which maybe sometimes the board would say, oh, we are all clean, we do the right way of business, but maybe you really don't know what's happening underneath at your tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 suppliers. So that's where we come in.
Thank you so much for speaking around that, and thank you so much for knowing so much around it and being so involved in the company that you work for. I didn't even know that existed to be able to go in and to be able to do some audits.
Developed countries, it's happening. Yeah. These are some real developed countries of examples, and they're not Indian examples. These are examples of literally matured countries where you'd be really surprised to know that is this happening here,
And this is the thing as well, and thank you so much for being involved and also for having the conversation with us today. I think it's definitely important when we're speaking about mining, when we're speaking about companies that have so much money involved and wealth, and our country, and there's a lot of countries that are very resourceful and have a lot of resources and are very wealthy, that these problems are probably going to rear their heads. So it's about auditing those things and being aware of those things that happen. So thank you so much for speaking to us today. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, nothing else. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and it was nice talking with you, Becky.
Pleasure. So I've got Jason here from who I met actually at Diggers and Dealers, and we had a great conversation.
I guess like-minded people into health and wellness. Just happened to be in a mining conference. So yeah, good to see you again.
And then here we are now, obviously at IMARC, and I have just commandeered you and said, hey, did you want to speak around, what is it around leadership? And we actually were having a great conversation of where that's come from for you, having been a leader in the past, and what I suppose is your Northern Star when it comes to being a leader and some of the experiences. So do you want to share with us or share with the audience around some of your experiences around that and what we were speaking about before?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess where it came from for me, I actually came from a hotel background, and I was in front of house. I needed to be able to talk to like CFOs and presidents and famous people, but I also came from, I grew up wanting to show respect to the guests and the pot cleaners and the janitors at night time as well, and that's really kind of just to instill a good sense of leadership and showing that I respect everybody as much equally. That it doesn't, it's easy for me to talk to CFOs of big mining companies, but I can also talk, to I guess the people in the back office, people who don't feel so valued as much. It's just a thing that I like to do, showing respect.
I love that, and we were speaking about, and actually, as you've just mentioned that, we didn't touch on this before, but so I've been in a workplace before, and I got called into an office, and there was a mediator in there, and one of the managers that I worked with had a problem with me, and I didn't realise what it was. Yeah. And so we're in this mediation, and what came out was that I was too happy, and that I treated him the same way as I treated everybody else. So he was expecting more respect than anybody else. So what you're speaking about, completely different, and I have that same kind of thing. Where do you think that's come from for you?
I just think I was brought up, to show respect. I'm Irish, you can probably tell from the accent, but I grew up in Africa. I grew up in Ghana, West Africa. Everybody around me showed me respect, and that's whether they were the office workers, whether they're the farmers, and I was raised to respect, especially my dad always taught me to respect the ladies in the house, so it just was a no-brainer to kind of bring that into how I work and how I treat people and I do business and how I want to be treated. Much to your point, if somebody told me that I had to treat them with more respect, I'd probably struggle, because I think I treat everybody with the same respect, and that's how it should be. Everybody deserves to be not validated, but everybody deserves to have a good morning of a morning, or how you doing. Everybody deserves to be talked to in the same way, and I don't see any difference between the CFO and the office administrator. Everybody's in there to get for the same thing.
I love it. And so where you've come from being in hotels and stuff, and what is it that you do now, and how have those skills or those values carried over into what you do now?
I think it is about just being able to selling into the mining industry and approaching people in the mining industry can be cutthroat, and I'm an undercover introvert, but I've just found that I just throw myself out there, and you got to break the ice, you got to make the conversations, and you get a lot of slaps in the face and a no thank you very much, but if you don't ask, you're never going to know.
It's a valid point, actually, and throwing a little curveball in there. When it comes to business, the amount of, there's the saying that you'll get 100 no's before you might get a yes, or there's other sayings. When it comes to that, what's gotten you to be able to cop those slaps in the face and still keep going, I suppose? Yeah,
that's a great question. Because I know it's funny, if you're looking like there's a market for everything, and if you ask enough people are everybody's looking for what you're doing. Everybody wants what you're offering, and it's down to the relationship and connection. And if you can make that quick connection, it flows. It might stutter. It might take years. It might take a couple of conferences. I mean, the reason why I walk around these conferences, just because I always say to my team, if I'm not walking around here talking about the deals, somebody else is talking about my deal. Somebody else is talking about my work, the opportunity I could be getting. So if I don't come and kind of show that face and look for the next opportunity, then somebody else is going to win, and not me.
I like that. Anything else you want to leave on when it comes to around leadership or culture, or things that have really, I suppose, shaped you when it comes to being the person that you are?
I think I think just openness and very flat I guess I like working autonomously, and I like working in a flat, hierarchical environment, and just being able to get on with it. And at the end of the day, everybody's, in the organization or out in business, everybody's looking for the same goal and just keep going towards it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. You nailed it.
Thank you very much.
So I've got Danny here who I was just asking how best to introduce Danny, but Danny wears a fair few hats, so it's probably best that I leave it up to you. How many hats do you wear? What are they? Where can we find you?
Back too many. So founder and director of the Resources Hub and Resourceful Women, career development and recruitment talent businesses. Recently became the president of the WA Mining Club, and I'm the co-vice chair of Core Learning Foundation.
So just a few things. One of the things that pricks me is around all of those things that are around connection, community, and bringing people together. And so you can't do that if you're not passionate about something. You can't do those things if you are just flippant about making change and, it's not of a huge interest to you. So I can tell that you're passionate about making those changes, you're passion-led and you're values-driven. What got you to that point of being able to drive so many ships to, success or to making those changes in the industry?
So I started in the industry 31 years ago yesterday. It was my anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. 13 weeks on, 3 week off roster in the Pilbara. Incredible. Like, who even does that? No. Yeah, crazy. And I think, I fell in love with mining. I fell in love with also just being in the Pilbara. It was amazing. It was just a real connection. And unfortunately, my previous partner committed suicide, so I went back mining, and that's when I met my husband. And, I fell into recruitment literally when my oldest son, who's now 25, was 6 months old, and I've been in it ever since. And I feel a real connection with career development, recruitment, talent management, because without that, we don't have an industry. And we are 70% blue collar, 30% white collar, but a lot of our industry is always so focused on technical and university-led careers, and we don't really speak of, positions that are entry level or that can take you into, your next realm from being in blue collar, diesel fitting, boiler making. All those, they can set you up for success in other areas by having that, I suppose, blue-collar technical aspect.
I love as well, you touched on that it's for different people, obviously, different people want to do different things. And entry level for some people, they've gone to university, they know exactly where they want to go, but a lot of people, including myself, don't necessarily know that. So entry level at a later age, and you might not necessarily
It's so doable, like I own the largest women in mining resources group. We've got just shy of 40,000 women, and I've been growing that group for 14 years, and that's always been a safe space for women to ask questions, because I know what it was like as a 21-year-old to be sort of thrown in that realm and to want to have sort of, I suppose, a support mechanism. And I think, there's so many opportunities out there. It's not just driving a dump truck. It's not just being a diesel fitter. It's not just being a geo or a mining engineer. There is like a plethora of career opportunities. But unfortunately, even from a younger age, which is why I'm so heavily involved in Core Learning Foundation, kids don't know what they don't know, right? So unless they've grown up in mining communities, like fortunately my 4 children did, they might not have an understanding of, the different types of roles that are out there that they can kind of, delve into. And I think that's really important. As an industry, we need to be more, I suppose, proactive in our approach of what we are trying to achieve, because without boots on ground, we're nothing.
Well, I love that little grab. Without boots on ground, we're nothing. And what I love about all the things that you do as well is creating that community for people and bringing people together. And when you're speaking about the Facebook group and being able to have those vulnerable conversations and ask those questions, they're not always welcome in every single environment. So it can make a huge difference. And for some of our lives, we've been, told to pit against each other. If you're not the strongest woman in the room, do anything you possibly can to make that happen. So I love your sincerity, your vulnerability, and your abundance in sharing opportunities with other people. So thank you for being that. And so what was it that, what is it that drives you to get to the point of doing those things? What gets you out of bed in the morning to make those changes? It's a big question.
I love our industry. I can't imagine being in any other industry ever. It's dynamic, it's ever evolving. I look at my 4 children who are all in industry, and I think how lucky you are to have parents who have kind of, I suppose, we haven't necessarily guided them, but we've been sort of in the background and, they can do and be whoever they want to be, but they've chosen our industry because they know that we love it and we're still involved in it and heavily involved in it. And I think we need, as an industry, we need to be more vocal, especially, like I said before, to those children that are less associated with what opportunities lay in front of them. And there's amazing career development opportunities, absolutely.
Yeah. You also mentioned as well you've got your kids who are in the industry and creating that safety, I suppose. You said that the kids are, lucky to have parents who've been in it. I would say they're lucky to have parents who've had a huge impact in changing it for them. And I know that is one of your kind of guiding lights and Northern Stars. So is that what's important to you in that aspect of creating that for future generations?
I think having that safety and continuity of community. I was fortunate that after I spent time working FIFO, I went and lived in, small mining communities, met my husband, and we left that small community, went to another one. And, the people, they become your family no matter what. And I think sometimes within other industries you really miss that connection. We're still in constant contact, and it's fantastic. And I think my children are really fortunate that they have grown up in that sort of environment, that they've almost been buffered, really. Yeah, very well prepared. And they, even now, my son went up to Panamonica recently, probably 12 months ago, and your surname's Tamati. Oh, so you're Ricky and Danny's son. It's like, yeah, I'm the eldest. Oh, okay, I know your parents, so it's kind of, continuing that legacy as well. And I think that's pretty amazing.
It is. You always know someone. Every site I go to, I know them from a different site. I know them from somewhere they've moved in different, circles and stuff. So it's really important as well to acknowledge yourself in your generosity for people and creating opportunities. We were having a conversation with John from AusIMM and speaking about that as well. And it's not always been the case. So commend you on being that person and creating that, because it's a lot of work. So thank you for doing all of that. Is there anything you wanted to share before we pop off?
I just think it's, it's really important that at an event like IMARC, we really showcase the different career opportunities that are out there, and they're forever evolving. We didn't have AI 2 years ago. Now all of a sudden we need AI prompters. Business improvement 7 years ago probably wasn't as prolific as it is now. So, positions, career opportunities within the sector are forever evolving, like they are within every sector. But I think it's critical for us to be able to showcase that to the world and to allow people to understand that you just don't have to be a haulback driver or a diesel fitter and spin spanners to get a gig in mining.
Oh, I love that. We'll leave it there. So we're here with on air with IMARC, and we've just had a little chat with Danny. If you want to reach out to her, we'll leave the details in the bottoms. Thank you for making time today.
Pleasure. Thanks, Beck.
So, being a leader in the business and having so many hands in different businesses, you have to be people-oriented. And so what's your leadership style, or what has got you to be someone who's passionate about people?
Yeah, okay, so my leadership style tries to be collaborative, I suppose. What I mean by that is I don't think there's one style that fits every person. You're dealing with a lot of personalities, and I suppose I learned that from sport. I was lucky enough to play a pretty decent level of sport when I was younger, and they give you a lot of training in leadership, and you're dealing with different people. So the old school style, I think, was just, this is how I do it, everyone has to join in, and where you might respond differently to a conversation to another person. So I think good leadership is learning how to get the best out of each individual and then trying to bring that together as a group. But I think open communication and different communication styles. You'll notice within a team, some people like it, direct conversation, some people like to be a bit of fluff around. There's all different for each individual, and I think the better leaders are the ones that can identify who the people in their team are.
I love that. And so it sounds like I do an archetype kind of profiling as well, work with that around with leaders. It has the 6 characters, similar to Myers-Briggs. Okay. Have you done that? Because it sounds like...
I haven't, though. I've heard of it, but I haven't done it. Mine's just more of, like I said, comes back to the sport background. So I haven't done a lot of I've done a little bit of education in management in business. And I've been doing business. I've had a business coach for the last 4 or 5 years, which has helped as well, because within that, we sort of like do a boardroom where we get different ownership. Might be 10 different business owners, whether it's a lawyer, a mechanic, or whatever. The similar problems are always around people and around management of people. So it doesn't matter what industry you're in, it's the same sort of problem. So
I love that. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. When do I get a job? Where do we sign up? Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Ben. I appreciate you making time today, and even though you got chucked into it.
yeah, on the spot, but no, I appreciate it.
You did. Thank you.
Very much.
So what was your name?
Brad Coupler, yeah.
Okay. So Brad, what's your last name?
Coupler. Yeah. So I got an invite here as part of the Next Gen Leaders program. So I applied for that with 2 of my colleagues back home in Perth. So I'm from WA. We work at a company called Fleur. And we got granted these sponsored passes as part of the Next Gen Leaders program. So we're just over here representing the company, and also here sort of just trying to meet a few people, talk with some of the vendors that we interact with back home, and also have a little look at how the graduate and hiring culture is. There's a few discussions with the Next Gen program around how we can build the future workforce and in the youth. So sort of here trying to tackle a few different things, but yeah, representing some of the younger people back home.
I love that. I'm WA based as well. Yeah. So yeah, WA, love that. So that's perfect for us to touch on around like what, and that's what we were actually speaking about yesterday with Tara is, I suppose, just navigating what it has looked like in the past for people, and then the changes that might need to be made for the next generation, like you're talking about. Yeah. So if you want to touch on that about things that you're kind of seeing, things that you're pleased with, and things that might need a little bit of improvement in that.
Yeah, so we were just listening in before. There was a bit of conversation about how we can sort of build up the image of the mining industry. I think a lot of people are, sort of starting to get scared. There was a few statistics before that we were listening to in a McKinsey presentation about sort of, I think it was saying 70% of young people sort of don't really have any interest in going into the resources sector. So we're sort of trying to debunk a few of those myths and also show the projects that we're working on and how sustainable they are long term. So I think that's sort of what brought me into the mining industry. I was trying a few different things out, and one of the projects that I got offered had a 50-year mine life, and to me that was like, all right, well, I've probably only got 50 years left in my career, I hope anyway. So if they're thinking there's still going to be stuff around that far down the track, then that's inviting for someone my age, and I'm still quite young. So I think back home we are still managing to get young people through. There seems to be a little bit of a drop off in unis for some of the disciplines, and we are obviously always trying to recruit, and we have quite a lot of projects on, and trying to resource those has been quite challenging. But I think we do have quite a good culture, at least where we work in the youth, and we still do have quite a few people coming through. So that is reassuring to see.
That's awesome. And it's really awesome as well to have the Next Gen program that's coming out, and awesome obviously to be at IMARC to be able to have conversations with people and debunk those myths as they're actually happening. So thank you so much for making time. We made it short and sweet. So who do you belong to, and where can we find you?
I'm with Fleur, Fleur Australia. So we're headquartered out of the US, but we have an office back home in Perth that focuses on sort of mining metals and the resource industry. But we play in a lot of different industries globally. We don't have a booth here, but there's a few of us walking around that are part of the Next Gen Leaders program. So if you see us, feel free to say hi. Otherwise, if you need any work, we focus on resource projects, EPCM, project delivery, design construct type work, and we have quite a good presence and a solid amount of work coming through in Perth. So, yeah.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you so much for making time. Thanks for joining us on the Resource Podcast, and we'll stay in touch.
Awesome. Look forward to seeing it.
Thank you. So I am here today at IMARC with Rod from IMARC, standing next to one of the most wonderful shiny trucks. What a great tactic to bring that here.
Yes, it's been an eye opener for a lot of people. They come along and are very excited to look at it. The interesting thing about this is it's an electric vehicle. It's fully electric, so it's not diesel. So we're showing the future of where we're going in the industry of electric vehicles.
I love that. And so, what is it? Is it a dig? It's a digger, right? And it's electric.
It's a loader, underground loader.
Yeah. Okay.
So it operates, working underground. So pulling obviously load and then hauling into trucks and taking it out to the surface. And there's a lot of issues underground with ventilation, diesel particulates, environmental heat, etc. from the traditional diesel trucks. So if we can move to battery equipment, we can relieve a lot of those problems and make it more about safety for the operator and a nicer environment for them to work in, quieter and healthier.
That's good. You touch on that. So we were asking the question before. Obviously, on the Resource Podcast, we're always talking about people, the people behind the company, and the stories behind those people. You are, in sales with it, but you talk to a lot of people. But then, bringing other employees and stuff on and talking about the company. What is it that you share around the company when it comes to the company ethos, or bringing people on board to be a part of the community at Epiroc?
Yes, it's a very important part of our business in talking about people. People is foremost in our organisation. Safety, obviously, of our people, but also developing opportunities for them to grow within the organisation. It's an interesting company. Been with them for 18 years. If you did a straw poll of our people, there'd be a lot of people with longer terms than me. We've got a couple of guys, which is unbelievable, reaching 50 years this quarter in 2024. So it's a good company for people ethos. We like to develop people with internally and retain, and obviously the diversity is a major thing. It's hard in the mining industry, but a lot of focus on that and making sure when we do our apprentice intake, at least 50% have to be female, that type of thing. So yeah, it's a big part of our organisation. When we have our management meetings, it's number one discussion, safety and people.
50 years is a huge... What did you say, 70? How many years have you been there? 18. 18 years you've been there. Okay, so they can't be doing too bad with people.
No, it's a great organisation to work with, and there's always an outlier, but most people would say it's a great organisation. They really try to look after their people and lead the way in terms of parental leave for both male and female, 12 weeks paid. So all those types of things to retain and attract employees is a big thing for our organisation.
I love that. What a great conversation, and what obviously a great company to work for. Everybody's obviously trying to do their best, and now going into the future, we're obviously going to navigate those kind of things. But that was, awesome. Great to hear what you guys are doing, and good luck in the future.
Thank you very much. Lovely chat.